Princess Evelisse Vosley had successfully escaped her wedding for 11 minutes when her stolen carriage criticized her sense of direction. The criticism came from beneath the passenger seat in the voice of the man she was supposed to marry. When she opened the hidden compartment, Alpha King Kaelor looked up from between 6 wrapped gravy boats and asked why his runaway driver was wearing a bridal veil. Evelisse nearly drove into a hedge. The gray carriage bounced across the abandoned logging road. White ribbons snapped behind it, and boxed wedding gifts struck one another with expensive thumps. Kaelor unfolded himself from the compartment. This required patience because Alpha Kings were not designed for furniture storage. One broad shoulder emerged, followed by black hair, a dark formal coat, and an expression of royal offense. His gold ceremonial crown remained wedged beside his left boot. Evelisse stared at him over one shoulder. The horses felt her distraction and increased their speed with the enthusiasm of creatures who would not pay for repairs. "What are you doing in my carriage?" she demanded. Kaelor braced one hand against the roof. "Your carriage? I stole it first." The king considered this argument. He had been crowned 3 months earlier and had already heard several disputes about borders, timber, and inherited fishing rights. None had begun with such refreshing honesty. "This was my escape carriage," he informed her. Evelisse faced the road again. "Then you should have escaped before I arrived." Behind them, the wedding bells of White Lake Estate began to ring. They should have marked the bride's walk across the Moon Rose lawn. Instead, the bells announced that 2 royal families had misplaced both essential participants. Their deep notes rolled over the distant gardens. Birds rose from the trees, and the horses surged down the narrow road. Kaelor reached for the reins. Evelisse slapped his hand away without looking. "Touch those, and I will remove a finger." He studied the Omega princess he had met only 4 times before that morning. At diplomatic dinners, she had worn flawless silk and spoken in calm, polished sentences. Now pine needles clung to her veil. A driver's coat concealed most of her ivory wedding dress, and one satin shoe rested on the carriage rail for leverage. She looked considerably more alive. "You chose the old timber road," Kaelor said. "It ends at the lake." "You waited 11 minutes to mention that." "I mentioned it from beneath the seat. You opened the compartment instead of turning." Evelisse defended herself. "A strange man spoke from my furniture. Investigation seemed reasonable. We are formally engaged. Not for much longer." The words landed between them with more force than either expected. Evelisse tightened her grip. Kaelor watched the empty road behind them instead of answering. The road behind them curved through thick pine. No riders had appeared yet, but the bells continued their alarm. White Lake Estate was not a fortress. That had been one reason both courts selected it for the ceremony. The beautiful property occupied neutral countryside between their kingdoms. Its lakefront lawns, pale stone villas, and flowering terraces offered dignity without suggesting either ruler had surrendered home ground. It also possessed 3 service gates, 40 delivery carts, and wedding staff too busy arranging sugared fruit to examine every driver. Evelisse had noticed those details during the rehearsal. She had grown up managing her late mother's country estate. Horses made sense to her. Stable accounts made sense. Roads usually made sense when people did not label them with 3 identical wolf symbols and expect foreigners to understand the difference. Her escape had started in the bridal villa when her attendant left to recover a missing pearl comb. Evelisse had removed the outer skirt frame, climbed through the flower room window, and crossed the herb garden in satin shoes. At the carriage shed, she found one gray vehicle already harnessed. A wooden dispatch plaque hung from its lantern hook. For Lakeside Storehouse, collect missing Moon Rose Arch. The plaque was genuine. The regular driver had abandoned his seat to watch the royal procession. Evelisse pulled on his spare coat and hat. Her veil would not fit beneath the hat, so she wrapped it around her throat like an extremely guilty scarf. The service guard recognized the vehicle and plaque. He waved her through, complaining that the floral arch should have arrived before breakfast. She had promised to express that opinion to management. Then she reached the first road marker and selected the middle wolf. The middle wolf apparently meant lake, cliff, and no useful exit. Kaelor's escape had involved less fabric and equal confusion. His captain had refused to participate openly but left one whispered message. The third gray carriage would be ready behind the gift shed. There had been 3 lines of gray carriages. Kaelor counted from the wrong courtyard, found an unlocked repair compartment, and concealed himself there before anyone could ask why the groom was inspecting gravy boats. When the carriage moved, he assumed his captain had finally developed initiative. He did not expect the driver to curse at a road sign in a southern accent. "There is nowhere to turn this carriage," Evelisse said. The logging road pressed between steep ground and dense trees. Wet branches scratched the painted doors. The team pulled a vehicle designed for smooth estate lanes, not abandoned tracks. Kaelor leaned from the side window. "There is a clearing ahead." "You just said the road ends." "A road can end in a clearing." Evelisse gestured ahead. "Your kingdom has deeply unhelpful roads. My kingdom puts words under its road symbols." "In your language." Kaelor paused. Evelisse gave him a brief, victorious glance. The carriage struck a rut. His crown escaped the compartment, rolled across the floor, and hit his ankle. He picked it up and looked for somewhere safe to put it. Every surface held wedding gifts. A porcelain moon goddess occupied one corner. A painted box promised matching ceremonial towels. Someone had contributed a carved sign reading, "2 hearts, 1 home." Kaelor turned the sign face down. Evelisse noticed. "A little late for subtlety." "I am protecting it from damage." Evelisse pointed out. "You are sitting on the word hearts. Then it is well protected." The bells faded behind them. Wind rushed past the windows, carrying pine resin and damp earth. For several minutes, only wheels and gift boxes argued. Kaelor watched Evelisse manage the horses. She kept the team balanced despite the ruts, easing the outside animal before every bend. Her hands were sure. Her posture remained upright beneath the ridiculous coat. This was not the decorative princess his council had described. He had never called her decorative himself. He had merely failed to correct the description often enough. Evelisse sensed his gaze and asked why he had fled. Kaelor tried to return the question, but she claimed priority because she had stolen the carriage first. That logic offended him on several levels. It also made him answer. He had not wanted to marry a woman he knew only through council reports. Evelisse felt the same about a man who never spoke to her without officials taking notes. The answer was too close to his own. Kaelor mentioned the private luncheon he had requested. Evelisse reminded him that 23 people attended. He had asked for 2 chairs. The palace had apparently interpreted that as 2 tables. She thought he could have dismissed everyone. 3 months on a throne had taught him that dismissing one official caused 2 more to investigate the empty chair. He thought she could have asked them to leave. She had been a guest in his court, about to become its queen. That final phrase tightened her grip on the reins. Becoming a queen without first becoming a person, to him, had been precisely the problem. Kaelor's jaw tightened. She heard the quiet change in his breathing and regretted the sharpness, though not the truth behind it. Before either could continue, daylight opened through the trees. The road sloped steeply downward. Beyond the last pines lay White Lake, bright beneath the morning sun. Water stretched from wooded banks toward distant hills. Near the shore, the logging road ended at a patch of mud and stacked timber. There was no bridge. There was no connecting road. There was only a rough timber raft tied beside an old loading platform. Evelisse pulled the reins. The horses slowed, but the heavy carriage continued downhill. Kaelor climbed over the front partition. "Move. I can stop it. The left trace is slipping." He reached past her and caught the emergency brake. Evelisse pulled the horses toward the muddy shoulder while he forced the lever down. Wood screamed against wood. The carriage turned sideways. Its rear wheel entered soft mud and sank to the axle. Boxes fell. The porcelain goddess landed face first in matching towels. The team stopped 6 yards from the water. Evelisse remained seated, breathing hard. Kaelor's arms still crossed in front of her, and his chest touched her shoulder through the driver's coat. His scent surrounded her for the first time without banquet spices or crowded rooms. It carried cedar, cold air, and the restrained force of his wolf. Her own she-wolf lifted her head. Kaelor withdrew at once. "You are welcome," he said. Evelisse recovered enough breath to be annoyed. "I had it under control." "The goddess disagrees." They climbed down. The left rear wheel had buried itself in mud. One trace strap was torn, and the narrow road offered no space to turn the team. Kaelor began unharnessing the horses. "We take these." Evelisse disliked riding directly toward their pursuers. Kaelor pointed out that they could not leave the horses trapped in their harness. She joined him without argument. The horses were innocent of royal planning. Together, they freed the team and turned the animals loose toward a patch of grass above the shore. Kaelor removed the harness bridles so reins would not catch on branches. Evelisse noticed the ease of his hands. He knew military horses, even if he could not select an escape carriage. Kaelor left his crown inside the stranded carriage. Captain Jorvan would recover it within minutes. Gold large enough to identify a king was useless on an escape route. A horn sounded in the forest. Both looked uphill. Riders moved between the distant trees. Sunlight flashed on dark uniforms. The horn pattern belonged to Kaelor's people. He assured her that they would never harm her. Evelisse considered being returned to the wedding the relevant harm. Evelisse ran toward the timber raft. It consisted of 8 thick logs tied with rope and crossbeams. A weathered push-pole lay across the center. The outlet current pulled steadily at its mooring. Kaelor caught up as she reached the loading platform. He warned that the raft moved timber and lacked a steering oar. Evelisse promoted it to royal transport and pointed at the push-pole. He explained that the pole worked only in shallow water. She recommended remaining near shallow water, as if lakes respected recommendations. Kaelor stepped onto the raft. It sank 2 inches beneath his weight. Evelisse stopped. "Off." He picked up the push-pole. "I know this lake. You know it ends your roads." Kaelor insisted. "I can guide the current. You can guide it from shore." Behind them, the riders reached the final bend. Hooves struck packed earth, accompanied by shouted orders. Evelisse grabbed the pole. Kaelor kept it. They pulled in opposite directions. The raft shifted away from the platform, checked only by the mooring rope. "Release it," Kaelor ordered. "You release it." Kaelor tightened his grip. "I am stronger." "Then this should be educational." Evelisse stepped inside his reach, turned beneath his arm, and used the pole as leverage. She had learned the movement during years of self-defense lessons that court tutors called graceful exercise. Kaelor expected her to pull. She kicked instead. Her satin shoe struck his abdomen while his weight rested on one heel. The newly crowned Alpha King left the raft with a dignified expression and no dignity at all. He hit the lake on his back. Water rose in a shining wall. Evelisse cut the mooring rope with a small blade from her garter. The raft spun into the outlet current. Kaelor surfaced with wet black hair across his eyes. "You kicked me." She planted the pole against the lake bed. "Your observational skills are improving." The royal riders burst into the clearing. Captain Jorvan, Kaelor's oldest guard, reached the shore first. His face displayed relief, horror, and a strong desire to resign. "Majesty!" Kaelor looked from the retreating raft to his captain. If he returned to shore, both families would force the ceremony forward before either runaway could recover. If he followed Evelisse, he would be swimming after the woman who had just rejected him with 1 foot. His wolf chose for him. Black fur swept over his skin. Bone and muscle shifted beneath water. A moment later, a massive wolf surged through the outlet, ears flat and gold eyes fixed on the raft. His first strokes looked formidable. Then his coat absorbed half the lake. The great black wolf sank until only his head, shoulders, and furious effort remained above water. Evelisse stared. Kaelor had been described in Southern court reports as the Black Wolf of Northwatch, terror of the mountain passes. Nobody had mentioned that the terror swam like an offended carpet. She began to laugh. It was not the delicate laugh taught for formal dinners. It bent her over the push-pole and made her veil fall into the water. The wolf growled around a mouthful of lake. "I am sorry," she called. "You look extremely powerful." He paddled harder. The current carried the raft toward a narrow channel between reed-covered banks. Once it entered, the riders would lose sight of them. Kaelor gained ground. His claws struck the end log, slipped, and struck again. Evelisse considered pushing him away with the pole. His wolf looked at her. It did not have the king's guarded expression. The beast looked wet, determined, and betrayed by both love and physics. Her she-wolf gave an unexpected pulse of concern. Evelisse lowered the pole. Kaelor seized the crossbeam and hauled himself aboard. The raft tipped violently. Evelisse grabbed his neck. The wolf planted all four paws and shook from nose to tail. Cold water exploded across the raft. It drenched Evelisse's hair, face, driver's coat, and remaining patience. It also soaked the wedding travel trunk she had dragged from the carriage before cutting the rope. She tightened both arms around the wolf's neck. "If you do that again, I will send you back." Kaelor's wolf wagged its tail. The tail struck the push-pole into the lake. They watched it float away. On shore, Captain Jorvin covered his face. The raft entered the reeds. Without a pole, it turned slowly in the current. Evelisse remained wrapped around a 200-pound wolf because moving either direction caused one side to sink. Kaelor's wolf settled beneath her arms with indecent satisfaction. "This is not affection," she told it. "This is weight distribution." The wolf leaned closer. "Your human is unbearable." One black ear turned toward her. "You are not much better." The wolf licked lake water from her cheek. Evelisse sat frozen. Behind them, the riders disappeared. The nearest road bridge stood half a day around the outlet, and no other boat waited at the loading point. Ahead, reeds opened onto a quiet southern channel lined with willow trees. The current weakened. Kaelor returned to human form before his wet coat could sink them completely. He appeared on the raft dripping, barefoot, and wearing torn trousers that had survived the shift through royal tailoring or stubbornness. Evelisse released him so quickly that the raft tilted again. They caught each other. Her palms landed against his bare chest. His hands closed around her waist. Water ran from his hair onto her face. For one startled breath, neither moved. Then the wedding trunk slid across the logs and struck Kaelor behind the knees. He sat down hard. Evelisse landed beside him. The raft steadied. Kaelor pushed wet hair from his eyes. "You laughed at my wolf. Your wolf removed our only steering tool. After you threw me into a lake." Evelisse reminded him, "You wanted the raft. I still want the raft." Evelisse looked around at the 8 wet logs beneath them. "Congratulations, you have half." They drifted beneath willow branches while White Lake Estate vanished behind the reeds. The wedding bells could no longer be heard. For the first time that morning, nobody was telling them where to stand, what to promise, or when to smile. Evelisse should have felt free. Instead, she sat soaked beside the man she had escaped, sharing a rough timber raft and one damaged honeymoon trunk. Kaelor looked equally pleased with destiny. "Where does this channel go?" she asked. He studied the trees, water, and angle of the sun. His expression shifted from offended groom to capable commander. "South Shore. From there, the lake road reaches Moon Bay in 6 days." Evelisse asked, "What is in Moon Bay?" "A morning ferry." Evelisse watched the northern bank disappear. Kaelor looked at her. They spoke together. "I am taking it." The raft rotated once, as if preparing for a long journey. The southern channel ended 2 hours later at a muddy bank occupied by frogs and one suspicious fisherman. The fisherman watched a barefoot Alpha King and a wet princess drag a royal honeymoon trunk from a timber raft. He looked at Evelisse's remaining veil, Kaelor's torn trousers, and the words eternal happiness painted across the lid. Then he returned to his fishing. People near White Lake respected privacy, especially when privacy looked expensive and unstable. Kaelor pulled the raft above the waterline. It weighed less now that his wolf was not sitting on it. Evelisse wrung water from the driver's coat. Beneath it, her ivory dress clung from shoulder to ankle. Mud decorated the hem with greater confidence than the seamstress had shown. "We need clothes," Kaelor said. "You need clothes. Mine still exist." He looked at the transparent wet silk. Evelisse crossed the coat over herself. "Stop inspecting the damage. I was assessing our needs." "Assess the trunk." Kaelor knelt beside it. 3 brass clasps held the lid. Each bore a tiny pair of joined wolves. The trunk had traveled in the gift carriage because it was meant to continue toward the lakeside honeymoon lodge after the ceremony. A bright red label marked it as priority royal luggage. That was why Evelisse had grabbed it before the carriage sank. The other choices were a porcelain goddess and a crate marked ceremonial pickles. She had trusted the luggage. The luggage had betrayed her. Kaelor opened the lid. 2 matching white robes lay on top, embroidered with their initials and a border of tiny gold hearts. He lifted one between 2 fingers. No. Evelisse found the second. "Yours has a crown over the pocket. That does not improve it." Beneath the robes lay a double bed blanket, 2 gold-rimmed plates, paired cups, scented oil, slippers, and a book titled 50 Principles of Royal Marital Harmony. Kaelor opened the book at random. Principle 12 required sincere praise every morning. Evelisse praised his wolf's brave swimming. Kaelor questioned her sincerity, which meant the principle had failed before lunch. He turned another page. Principle 29 recommended resolving disagreements before bed through gentle physical reassurance. Kaelor closed the book. The author lacks boundaries. Evelisse took it from him and placed it beneath the wet blanket. At the bottom of the trunk, they found a leather envelope. It contained a map of the official lake honeymoon route, 2 bearer passes, and a pouch of stamped wooden tokens. The passes did not include names. They admitted 1 newly married pair to approved inns, ferries, and festival transport along the southern shore. The tokens could purchase meals and rooms on that route. They could not be exchanged for ordinary money. Evelisse counted enough tokens for 4 shared nights or 2 separate ones. Kaelor immediately selected the less economical arrangement. Kaelor studied the pale road beyond the willows. The Moon Bay ferry left late in the morning on the 6th day. The shore route could deliver them before departure. He intended to take the northern boat to a royal hunting lodge. From there, he could send instructions and return after the wedding stopped waiting with an open door. His kingdom would survive several days without observing his breakfast. It was not a complete plan. Neither was hers. Evelisse had imagined reaching her border, cutting off the dress, and writing her family a firm explanation from somewhere with locks. She had not considered food, weather, or the possibility that her Alpha King fiancé would occupy the same escape route. The Western connection would take Evelisse home. Kaelor accepted that plan without asking whether home was where she wanted to be. Their routes would divide at Moon Bay. The fact should have brought relief. Instead, the quiet between them became oddly careful. Evelisse pulled out the matching slippers. 1 pair was too small for Kaelor. The other was even smaller because whoever packed the trunk believed royal men wore ceremonial footwear with pointed toes. Kaelor held one against his foot. "This is an attack. It matches your robe. Then the conspiracy is organized." The fisherman made a sound that might have been a laugh. They changed behind opposite sides of a willow thicket. Evelisse kept her underdress and added the white robe over it. Kaelor wore the larger robe closed above his damaged trousers. The effect was not subtle. His robe ended several inches below the knee. Gold hearts crossed his broad chest, and the crowned pocket rested over 1 pectoral like a military decoration. Evelisse looked at him. She pressed her lips together. Kaelor tied the sash. "Say it." "Your Majesty looks radiant." Kaelor reminded her, "The praise principle requires sincerity. Your knees look powerful." The fisherman laughed openly this time. Kaelor lifted the trunk onto one shoulder. "We are leaving." They reached the lake road near midday. Sun warmed the wet fields, raising the smells of grass and dark soil. Bees moved through white clover beside the ruts. Kaelor navigated without difficulty now. He recognized distant ridges, stream crossings, and the old watch posts along the southern shore. Evelisse noticed that he checked the road behind them at every hilltop. "Your riders cannot cross the outlet," she said. "They will use Stonebridge." "How long?" Kaelor calculated. "Half a day to reach it, another half to circle south. Then we are ahead. For now." The pursuit teams would expect each runaway to head toward a separate border. Their decision to remain together gave them an accidental advantage. So did their clothing. No sensible search party would expect an escaped Alpha King to travel in a knee-length honeymoon robe covered in hearts. They walked until the wet slippers began dissolving. Evelisse had spent years inspecting her mother's estate accounts. She knew what boots should cost, how long oats remained fresh, and why stable workers lied about broken wheel rims. She did not know which moss indicated south or whether a cloud promised rain. Kaelor knew both. He had slept outdoors during border patrols and could identify weather by smell. He could also locate clean water, select safe ground, and walk for miles without noticing his bare feet were bleeding. Evelisse noticed. "Stop." Kaelor turned. "Why?" She pointed at the red marks beneath his heel. "Because your royal blood is escaping through the bottom." He looked down as if the injury belonged to someone else. "It is a surface cut. It is leaving a trail." That convinced him. They sat on a stone wall. Evelisse opened the trunk and found no bandages, though it contained 4 silk handkerchiefs embroidered with "Together Always." She tore one in half. Kaelor looked offended on behalf of ceremonial sentiment. It was a gift, so is the absence of infection. She cleaned his heel with water from a roadside spring and tied the silk around it. Kaelor watched her lowered head and careful hands. The princess, he remembered, had never knelt. Chairs appeared before she needed them, and servants retrieved anything that fell. He realized he had confused being attended with being helpless. "Thank you," he said. Evelisse looked up. He had spoken without irony or title. "You are welcome." The moment lasted until she stood and the back of her robe caught on the stone wall. The sash came loose. Kaelor turned away so quickly he nearly stepped into the spring. Evelisse retied it. "You can look now. I was observing the road." Evelisse observed, "The road is behind you. It may have moved." They continued south. By late afternoon, the first village appeared around a small harbor. Painted signs showed boats, bread, and paired wolves beneath a crescent moon. The official honeymoon route had begun. People noticed the robes before they noticed the mud. A baker leaned from her window and called congratulations. 2 children threw flower petals at them. An elderly man offered Kaelor advice about keeping a wife happy, most of which involved surrendering arguments early. Kaelor thanked him with the solemnity of receiving military intelligence. Evelisse waited until they passed. "Will you follow his advice?" "We are not married." "Then you remain free to lose arguments inefficiently." The largest inn displayed the same paired wolf symbol as their pass. Its front windows glowed above boxes of red flowers. Inside, warm air carried roasted onions, soap, and wood smoke. Their damp robes began steaming near the door. The innkeeper was a round woman named Mistress Berta. She took one look at the embroidered initials and clasped both hands beneath her chin. "The White Lake couple!" Evelisse froze. Kaelor's wolf stirred beneath his skin. Berta hurried around the desk. "We were told the royal honeymoon party might pass this week. I expected guards and a gold carriage." "We value simplicity," Evelisse replied. Berta examined the mud, torn trousers, and Kaelor's silk bandage. "Very simple." The official route announcement had not included portraits. Royal planners considered it romantic to let the couple travel with limited ceremony at approved properties. Nobody expected them to arrive before the wedding. Kaelor presented the bearer pass. "We require 2 rooms." Berta's delight faltered. "The pass provides 1 marital suite. We will pay for another." Evelisse opened the token pouch. Berta counted the wooden coins and explained that 2 rooms would consume nearly half. Kaelor asked the ordinary cash price. Berta named it. He nodded as if she had described weather and reached for money he no longer possessed. Evelisse caught his sleeve. 1 room. His gaze dropped to her hand. We agreed otherwise. We agreed before learning your feet consume textiles. Berta brightened again. The marital suite is our finest. It was certainly the most committed. The bed occupied the center beneath a carved wooden moon. 12 heart-shaped pillows formed a red wall across the mattress. Curtains embroidered with paired wolves hung around a copper bath. On the mantel stood a blue candle labeled Harmony Flame. Berta lit it while explaining that the flame responded to marital tension with soothing music. Kaelor looked at Evelisse. Evelisse studied the candle. A harp began playing. Berta sighed happily. It already understands you. She left before they could return it. Kaelor closed the door. I will sleep on the floor. You have injured feet, Kaelor corrected her. 1 foot. The other will become jealous. The harp played faster. Kaelor approached the candle. Stop! The flame turned pink. A flute joined the harp. Evelisse sat on the bed and laughed. Kaelor attempted a smaller command without alpha pressure. The candle added bells. It senses resistance, she told him. It senses poorly. The music swelled. Evelisse opened the harmony book. Principle 7 suggested that couples interrupt conflict with a meaningful compliment. Your knees remain impressive, she offered. The flute stopped. The harp softened. Kaelor turned from the candle. You handled the horses well. The bells faded. They stared at the peaceful blue flame. I dislike it, Kaelor decided. The entire orchestra returned. They smothered the candle beneath a wash basin. Berta sent up borrowed clothing, dinner, and a basin of warm water. The clothing came from her adult children. Evelisse received a green wool dress and soft boots. Kaelor received brown trousers, a plain shirt, and boots only slightly too small. He examined the price tags Berta had left for possible purchase. Kaelor found them reasonable. Evelisse found the shirt worth 1/3 of its label. He defended its construction. She held up a loose seam that promised to separate by tomorrow. Brown fabric, she informed him, was not proof of quality. Kaelor asked how she knew. Evelisse listed 8 years of managing clothing, horses, grain, wages, and roofs at her country estate. Princesses occasionally encountered objects before banquets. Her tone remained light, but he heard the old irritation. My council described your work as ceremonial oversight. Your council has never survived a leaking dairy roof. Evelisse gave him the correct price. He carried both outfits downstairs and returned after negotiating with Berta. His price remained too high, but only by 1 meal token. He justified the extra token by calling the boots imported. Evelisse identified their exotic origin as the village across the lake. Kaelor maintained that water still made the claim technically accurate. Evelisse smiled despite herself. They ate dinner beside the covered harmony candle. The soup was thick with barley and roasted vegetables. Rain began tapping the windows, bringing the smell of wet wood through the frame. Their chairs stood on opposite sides of a small table. Without officials, the silence felt unfamiliar rather than formal. Kaelor broke bread. Why did you learn estate management? My mother left me her property. My father thought it would keep me occupied until marriage. Kaelor asked, did it? It kept 40 families paid and doubled its apple yield. Marriage remained avoidable until today. Kaelor's mouth shifted. Was that almost a smile, she asked? No. From beneath the wash basin came one muffled harp note. Evelisse laughed into her soup. Kaelor told her about military patrols in the northern passes. His father had sent him at 19, believing hardship would build judgment. It had built strong legs, practical weather sense, and a lifelong distrust of frozen socks. He knew how to establish a camp in sleet. He did not know the usual cost of soup because someone had always paid before he saw a bill. Evelisse found the admission unexpectedly endearing. She did not tell him. After dinner, they established a sleeping border. 6 heart pillows belonged to Kaelor on the floor. 6 remained with Evelisse on the bed. Kaelor folded the double blanket and took half. "You will be cold," Evelisse said. "I am a northern wolf." Evelisse noted, "Your knees are already exposed to unusual hardship. My knees have received enough attention from you." The wash basin vibrated over a silent but determined chord. They went to sleep. Evelisse woke after midnight to footsteps in the corridor. The room was dark except for rain-softened moonlight. The fire had collapsed into red coals. Kaelor was no longer on the floor. A massive black wolf stood between the bed and the door. His ears pointed forward. A low growl moved through his chest as the footsteps stopped outside. Evelisse's she-wolf surfaced beneath her ribs. She recognized danger, but also the broad black body placed in front of them. Someone tested the handle. Kaelor's fur rose. Evelisse reached beneath her pillow for the little blade she had retained from her garter. The handle turned once, met the lock, and stopped. A drunken man's voice apologized to the door. Another voice explained that his room was upstairs. The footsteps moved away. Kaelor waited until silence returned. Then he looked over his shoulder at Evelisse. His wolf had none of the king's embarrassment. It walked to the bed, placed its chin on the mattress, and inspected her face. "False alarm," she whispered. The wolf exhaled warm air over her hand. Evelisse touched one black ear. Kaelor's wolf closed its eyes. She stroked the thick fur behind it. The animal leaned harder until its chin rested across her knees. "You are much easier than he is." The tail struck the floor once. "Do not become proud. Your swimming remains terrible." The wolf opened one eye. Evelisse continued scratching behind its ear. Her she-wolf relaxed enough to curl near the surface of her mind. At some point, Evelisse fell asleep sitting against the headboard. Morning sunlight found Kaelor human again, kneeling beside the bed with his head across her lap. One of her hands remained tangled in his hair. Both woke at the same moment. Kaelor lifted his face slowly. Evelisse looked down at him. His cheek rested against the green dress. Her bare foot had somehow ended beneath his shoulder. "The floor moved," he said. "Across the room? The building may be unstable." Evelisse recalled. "Your wolf climbed onto my knees. He was maintaining security. I scratched his ears." Kaelor became very still. Evelisse smiled. "He liked it. You exploited a vulnerable state." He rolled onto his side and demanded more. Kaelor stood with what remained of his dignity. One heart pillow clung to the back of his shirt. Evelisse did not inform him until they reached breakfast. By then, every person in the dining room had seen it. Mistress Berta clasped her hands again. "Marriage suits you, Majesty." Kaelor removed the pillow. Evelisse buttered her bread with perfect serenity. Under the table, her shoe touched his boot. Neither moved away immediately. The honeymoon tokens paid for breakfast, but not the afternoon coach. Mistress Berta explained this while Kaelor examined the fare board. The route coach accepted ordinary coin or a red festival voucher. They possessed neither. "Can the wooden tokens become coin?" he asked. Berta looked scandalized. "They are symbols of marital generosity." "Can generosity purchase transportation?" "Only within participating locations." Evelisse finished her tea. "The coach is not participating." "The coachman divorced the baker's sister," Berta explained. "Nothing has participated since." Outside, colored banners crossed the village square. A painted arch announced the annual Moon Lake Partners Festival. Beneath it, a board promised a cash prize and 2 red coach vouchers. Kaelor read the competition list and rejected it immediately. Evelisse pointed to the vouchers. A compatibility examination seemed survivable compared with 6 days on foot. They had not yet passed any military checkpoints, as Kaelor noted. Evelisse called the festival useful practice. Registration required their couple pass. The cheerful clerk asked for initials. Evelisse supplied K and E Lake before Kaelor could invent anything more royal. He tied 1 blue ribbon around each wrist. "The ribbons must remain connected during every event," he said. A length of blue cord joined them. Kaelor lifted it. "This seems unsafe," the clerk smiled. "That is why it builds trust." Evelisse tugged the cord. Kaelor moved half a step toward her. "It works," she decided. 20 couples gathered in the square. Some had been married for decades. Others wore honeymoon badges and looked at one another with fresh optimism. Kaelor and Evelisse looked like fugitives in borrowed clothes tied together by municipal string. The first event tested knowledge. Partners sat back to back and wrote answers on small boards. For Evelisse's favorite breakfast, Kaelor wrote tea. For his, Evelisse wrote food. The host rejected both while she defended the broad accuracy of her answer. The next question asked where each partner most wanted to travel. Evelisse wrote away. Kaelor wrote anywhere else. The host reluctantly awarded half a point. Asked to identify their partner's greatest strength, Kaelor wrote diplomacy. Evelisse wrote being large. He objected that size was not a skill. She considered that unfair after it solved several problems and created only the one involving the tilting raft. The crowd laughed. The host awarded no point but thanked them for honesty. By the end of the examination, they ranked 19th. The 20th couple had forgotten each other's names after 52 years together and seemed unconcerned. "We are losing," Kaelor said. Evelisse tied back her hair. "We were losing when you chose the wrong carriage." "You chose the carriage. You furnished it with a king." The second event involved moving a sack of flour through an obstacle lane while both partners wore one enormous coat. Kaelor and Evelisse entered through opposite sides of the garment. His right arm and her left controlled the sleeves. The coat fit Kaelor's shoulder and reached Evelisse's ankles. They had to carry the flour sack between them. "Follow my pace," he said. "Your pace is twice the length of mine." Kaelor advised, "Then take longer steps." "I will detach your knee." The starting bell rang. They attempted the first barrier and immediately turned in different directions. The giant coat twisted around them. Kaelor's arm rose, lifting Evelisse partly from the ground. Her feet swung once. "Put me down." Kaelor ordered, "Stop climbing." "I am not climbing. Your shoulder kidnapped me." They stumbled through a row of hanging ribbons. The flour sack struck a post. White dust burst over Kaelor's face. His wolf sneezed inside him. Evelisse laughed, inhaled flour, and sneezed too. The harmony candle would have enjoyed them. At the rope barrier, Evelisse stopped fighting his stride. She gave the rhythm instead. Short, short, lift. Kaelor followed. They cleared the rope. The next obstacle required one partner to walk backward. Kaelor trusted Evelisse's instructions, though she led him through a basket of apples. He did not fall. He caught 3 apples against the flour sack and kicked a 4th toward a child. The crowd cheered. They crossed the finish line in 5th place. The host inspected the flour remaining in their sack. Nearly all survived, although much of it now decorated their hair. He congratulated their improvement. Evelisse concluded that they understood flour better than each other. The third event required couples to build a small traveling shelter without speaking. Kaelor relaxed for the first time. He had constructed military camps in snowstorms. The materials, however, included striped canvas, 6 decorative poles, pink rope, and instructions printed as a romantic poem. The first line ordered 2 hearts to rest where 4 corners met. Kaelor announced that this was not an instruction. The judge's bell cost them 1 point for speaking. Evelisse put a finger against his lips. Kaelor looked down at her. Her fingertip remained there half a second longer than necessary. Then she pointed at the poles. He selected 4. She shook her head and held up 6 fingers. Kaelor showed 4 again because structures required logic, not emotional arithmetic. Evelisse took the poem and indicated a later line about 2 dreams rising above 4 promises. 6 poles. He accepted this insult to engineering. They worked without speech. Kaelor set the frame while Evelisse interpreted the decorative knots. Her estate experience included garden tents and harvest pavilions. His included wind resistance and rapid anchoring. Their shelter rose first. It was also the only one tied firmly enough to survive when a gust crossed the square. 3 romantic tents collapsed. One sailed into the bakery. Kaelor and Eveliss's shelter remained upright, though its central banner displayed the words, "Passion requires pegs." They won the event. The 4th test was blind recognition. 10 men stood in one line, 10 women in another. Blindfolded participants identified partners by touching only hands and forearms. The host burned neutralizing herbs before either round. Mint and smoke covered every personal scent around the platform. Kaelor disliked strangers touching Evelisse. His wolf disliked it more. The emotion arrived too quickly for him to hide. Cedar sharpened around his skin. Evelisse pointed out that this was a game. Kaelor knew. His wolf considered the rules poorly designed. She assured the animal that she could identify her own fiancé. The word fiancé affected both man and wolf. Evelisse realized what she had said and looked away first. Kaelor entered the line. Blindfolded, she moved from one pair of hands to the next. Some were soft, some calloused, some nervous. Kaelor's hands were warm and broad, with a sword callus beneath the right thumb. She had noticed it during the carriage break and again on the raft. When she reached him, his fingers remained still. Evelisse touched the callus. Her she-wolf recognized his controlled stillness before her mind finished. "This one," she said. The crowd applauded. Kaelor's turn came next. He wore the blindfold while 10 women stood before him. With scent unavailable, he touched the first hand, then the second. Evelisse waited 7th in line. She wondered what he knew about her without scent, title, or wedding silk. He reached her. His fingertips brushed the inside of her wrist, where a faint, hardened line remained from years of rains. He stopped. Evelisse. It was the first time he had spoken her given name. The sound moved through her more intimately than it should have. The host removed his blindfold. Kaelor was already looking at her. They won that event too. The final challenge was a weighted cart course. Couples had to move a small wagon through market streets, collect 5 marked parcels, and return without breaking anything. Evelisse understood carts. Kaelor understood routes. One glance divided the work without debate. Evelisse would drive. Kaelor would navigate, using complete words and remaining above the seat. They finished 2 minutes ahead of the nearest pair. Their wagon contained all 5 parcels, 4 extra apples, and 1 elderly spectator who mistook it for public transport. The combined score placed them first by 1 point. The square erupted in applause. Evelisse received the coin purse, while Kaelor accepted 2 red coach vouchers and a ribbon reading, "Most Promising Union." He turned the ribbon over. The other side read, "Festival Property. Please return next year." Evelisse tied it around his neck. "It suits you." "I am not wearing this. You wore hearts yesterday." Kaelor qualified, "Under emergency conditions." Your knees were admired across the village. Kaelor removed the ribbon and tied it around her wrist instead. "Then you keep the evidence." His fingers lingered near her pulse. The crowd began chanting for the winners to kiss. Kaelor and Evelisse stepped apart so quickly that their blue connecting cord pulled tight. They collided again. The crowd laughed harder. Kaelor steadied her by the waist. Evelisse's hands landed against his chest, still dusted with flour. Their faces stopped close. The chant continued. Kaelor's gaze dropped once to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. Evelisse felt her she-wolf press forward. The animal did not care that their wedding remained abandoned beside a lake. "No," Evelisse told the crowd. Kaelor released her immediately. He did not look embarrassed or offended. He simply faced the host and requested their prize. The respect in that small choice unsettled her more than a kiss might have done. They left the square with coin, vouchers, and 1 loaf awarded for entertainment value. At the edge of the village, Evelisse bought proper walking boots for both of them. Kaelor selected a pair priced at twice the others. The merchant praised their reinforced royal stitching. Evelisse turned 1 boot over and exposed glue beneath the thread. The merchant denied the evidence while looking directly at it. She pulled one thread. Half the decorative seam detached. Kaelor chose the cheaper boots. Outside, Kaelor credited her with saving 4 coins. Evelisse valued saving his feet from another embroidered handkerchief. He complained that she had destroyed the first before confirming its market value. Still, even he preferred a healthy heel to intact repetitive sentiment. They reached the coach station an hour before departure. A line of passengers waited beside a long green vehicle drawn by 4 horses. Luggage occupied the roof beneath a canvas cover. Kaelor saw the notice first. 2 royal sketches had been nailed beside the ticket window. The artist had captured Kaelor's severe eyes and Evelisse's formal profile. Beneath them, a message requested information about 2 missing royal persons. It did not call them fugitives. Royal notices preferred misplaced. Evelisse pulled her hood forward. Those look nothing like us. Mine has my scar. Yours has more hair. Kaelor touched his head. Only slightly, she assured him. 2 mounted guards waited near the coach. Their uniforms belonged to Evelisse's country. Her elder brother had sent them north, expecting her to flee toward home. They were questioning separate travelers and examining luggage. The couple pass would withstand inspection, but their faces might not. Evelisse opened the honeymoon trunk. The blanket. Kaelor stared at the enormous embroidered cover. No, you preferred the robes? They wrapped the double blanket around their shoulders and joined the line. It concealed their clothing and most of Kaelor's height when he bent slightly. The design showed 2 wolves beneath the words never apart. The Southern Guard approached. Names? Evelisse presented the bearer pass, Kara and Ellis Lake. Kaelor looked at her. She squeezed his arm beneath the blanket. The guard studied the pass. Newly married? Yesterday, Evelisse replied. Where? White Lake. That answer attracted his attention. Kaelor's wolf responded to Evelisse's tension. Cedar and warm alpha possession rolled beneath the blanket before he could prevent it. The guard stepped back. To another wolf, Kaelor smelled like a male guarding his new mate from rude questions. Evelisse's she-wolf reacted to the scent. She moved closer beneath the blanket, resting one palm against Kaelor's chest. His heart beat hard beneath it. We are trying to begin our honeymoon, she said. The guard became uncomfortable. Of course. He waved them through without comparing the sketches again. They boarded the coach still wrapped together. Only after taking the rear seat did Evelisse loosen her grip. Kaelor's arm remained around her shoulders. You can release me, she murmured. The guard is watching. Evelisse checked behind them. The guard had turned away and was questioning a cheese merchant. Dedicated, she observed. Kaelor removed his arm. The space it left felt colder. The coach departed. Wheels rolled over the southern road while the village disappeared behind them. Other passengers included a family with 3 children, 2 wool traders, and an elderly honeymoon couple returning to the lake after 40 years. The older wife admired Kaelor and Evelisse's blanket. You still sit close, she told them. Evelisse explained that weather required it. The woman looked through the open window at clear sunlight. Very local weather, she agreed. Her husband slept beside her with one hand around a basket of pears. The coach followed the shore through low fields and wooded slopes. White Lake flashed between trees. Far behind, the outlet hills hid the estate. Evelisse watched reflections move across the water. Kaelor asked why she had agreed to the marriage. Agreement, Evelisse thought, was a generous description. She had attended every negotiation and approved the date. So had he. Kaelor believed her silence meant she wanted the match. Evelisse had made the identical mistake about him. The answer revealed the absurd symmetry between them. Each had mistaken the other's silence for consent while treating personal silence as survival. Her father considered the match ideal. His kingdom gained a southern connection, while hers gained a military ally. The documents said nothing useful about what happened to Evelisse afterward. Kaelor believed she would retain her title, property, and household. Evelisse had seen promises on paper and 3 rejected household requests. He turned fully toward her. Which requests? Evelisse named them. Independent management of her inherited estate, the right to retain her own staff, a separate advisory office not supervised by his counsel. Kaelor's confusion became unmistakable. He had approved her estate and staff, then requested clarification on the office. His reply reached her as a promise to review all authority after marriage. That was not what he had written. They sat with that discovery. It was not a sinister conspiracy. Kaelor knew exactly how it happened. His counsel transformed direct language into cautious policy. Evelisse's court then translated that caution into defensive formality. By the time the answer reached her, one question had become a rejection. Kaelor's private dinner had returned as a state luncheon. Evelisse's protocol officer claimed he preferred witnesses. In truth, he preferred them during treaties and sword disputes. His romantic categories had been limited. Evelisse thought of her own failed letter. She had drafted a private note asking whether they could postpone the engagement announcement until they knew each other better. Her tutor read it, turned pale, and explained that uncertainty would insult a new king. Evelisse allowed the letter to be rewritten into a message, thanking Kaelor for his honorable proposal. She had surrendered honesty before anyone could reject it. She admitted writing to him before allowing someone to remove everything true from the letter. The original had said she was afraid, not exactly of Kaelor, but of disappearing beside him. Kaelor leaned back. The coach creaked around them. One child near the front began singing to herself. Kaelor had expected her experienced court to treat him like a temporary obstacle. Evelisse had never imagined an Alpha King could fear being diminished by her. Kaelor's power had seemed complete from the other side of the banquet table. You just inherited a throne, she realized. Everyone reminded him that his father had filled the throne better. He feared a marriage that gave them another person through whom to question every decision. He thought she might control him. She expected him to control her. The old wife across the aisle opened one eye. Most marriages begin with both people overestimating their influence. Her husband continued sleeping. Kaelor and Evelisse looked forward like children caught whispering. The old woman smiled and closed her eye. For the next mile, neither spoke. Yet the silence no longer felt empty. It contained 2 explanations they should have exchanged months earlier. The coach reached a crossroads near sunset. The family and wool traders descended for an eastern connection. Kaelor and Evelisse continued south with the older couple. At a hilltop, Kaelor spotted mounted figures far behind on the road. They were too distant for uniforms, but they moved quickly. The pursuit had found the southern shore. Kaelor judged distance, horse condition, and the coach's slow team. The next stop lay an hour away. Their pursuers would catch them first. The coachman could not outrun royal riders. They needed to leave the road without making him responsible for hiding them. The elderly husband woke as Kaelor reached for the trunk. Trouble? He asked. Family, Evelisse replied. The old man nodded with immediate understanding. Worse. His wife told the coachman she felt ill and required a brief stop near the next orchard. When the coach slowed, Kaelor and Evelisse slipped through a gap in the hedge with their trunk and blanket. The older woman waved once before the coach resumed its route. Evelisse watched it leave. Why did she help us? Kaelor lifted the trunk. She believes we are newlyweds escaping family. That is nearly accurate. Accuracy is improving. They crossed the orchard toward the dark line of forest beyond it. The sun had dropped behind White Lake. Apples scented the cool air, and fallen fruit softened beneath their boots. On the road, horns announced the riders reaching the coach. Kaelor and Evelisse entered the trees together. Neither suggested separating. The forest path rewarded that decision by disappearing 20 minutes later. Kaelor stopped beneath a beech tree. Evening shadows filled the space between trunks. Damp leaves smelled rich underfoot, and the lake wind had begun to cool. "There was a path," Evelisse said. "There remains a path." She looked behind them. Ferns had closed over the faint trail. "Where?" Kaelor pointed between two nearly identical trees. "That is a squirrel route." Kaelor reasoned squirrels avoid cliffs. "Is that the standard for royal navigation?" He set down the trunk and examined a patch of moss. "The southern road lies beyond this ridge." "How far?" 2 miles. Thunder sounded over the lake. Evelisse studied the darkening sky. "Your weather sense has become less reassuring." "I told you rain was coming," she corrected him, "after the cloud arrived." "The cloud confirmed my judgment." They climbed. Kaelor carried the trunk because its handle strained under the weight. Evelisse carried the blanket, map, and remaining loaf. The loaf had survived flour, pursuit, and one accidental meeting with Kaelor's elbow. It no longer resembled bread, but it remained edible in areas. Rain reached them before the ridge. Large drops struck leaves and darkened their borrowed clothes. Within minutes, water streamed between roots. Wind shook the high branches. Kaelor smelled lightning before it split the sky. He caught Evelisse's arm and pulled her away from an exposed oak. Thunder cracked overhead. Her she-wolf recoiled. Evelisse continued walking as though nothing had happened. Her shoulders became too straight, and her breath shortened. Kaelor noticed but did not mention it. The ridge revealed an abandoned stone watchtower 50 yards downslope. Its roof leaned, but one shutter remained intact. They reached it through sheets of rain. The door resisted. Kaelor pushed once and broke the lower hinge. Evelisse inspected the hanging wood. "You could have lifted the latch." It was stuck. She lifted the latch, which moved freely. Kaelor placed the door against the frame. It is no longer stuck. Inside, the tower smelled of cold ashes, moss, and old bird nests. A narrow room occupied the ground floor. Stone steps climbed to a platform with missing roof tiles. Someone had left dry wood beneath an overturned bench. Kaelor built a fire using bark from a wall crevice and a spark from 2 stones. Evelisse watched the flame catch. That was useful. He glanced up. Principle 12? Sincere praise. Do not become dependent. They spread the wedding blanket near the fire. Its embroidery showed a golden moon above the phrase, 2 paths, 1 destination. Evelisse read it. The trunk is becoming aggressive. Kaelor turned the phrase toward the floor. They ate the surviving portion of bread and 2 apples from the festival cart. Rain hammered the roof. Water ticked into a broken pot in one corner. The storm deepened after dark. Every thunderclap brought Evelisse's she-wolf closer to the surface. Her nails sharpened briefly against the blanket. Her ears threatened to shift beneath damp hair. She moved toward the stairs. "I need privacy." Kaelor did not ask why. "Take the upper floor. The roof leaks." "I prefer fresh air." Evelisse accused him. "That is a lie." "It is a practical relocation." He carried the trunk upstairs. Rain entered through 3 roof gaps, but a dry section remained beneath the northern wall. Kaelor placed the trunk there and returned below. He sat beside the damaged door with his back against stone. Evelisse remained near the fire, wrapped in the double blanket. Another thunderclap made her she-wolf press painfully beneath her skin. She had learned young that royal omegas were expected to shift gracefully. Full loss of control became gossip. Fear became evidence that an alpha spouse should manage them. Evelisse had therefore learned to hide every imperfect transformation. Kaelor faced the doorway instead of her. Minutes passed. Black fur moved over his arms. His body reshaped with controlled ease until the giant wolf occupied the entrance. He lay down with his nose toward the rain. He did not look back. The gesture gave her privacy without leaving her alone. Evelisse's she-wolf understood before Evelisse did. Her shift came slowly. Gray-brown ears emerged first, followed by claws and a thick tail beneath the blanket. She did not complete the change. She did not need to. The black wolf continued guarding the broken door. Cold wind entered around him. Evelisse watched rain gather along his fur. "You will become that carpet again." One ear turned toward her. "Move closer to the fire." The wolf remained where he was. That was not an invitation to argue. His tail tapped stone once. Evelisse gathered the blanket and crossed the room. She sat several feet behind him, leaving space between their wolves. Her tail escaped the blanket and curled around her hip. Kaelor's wolf glanced back. He saw the partial shift and immediately lowered his gaze. No dominance, no surprise, no attempt to approach. Evelisse's she-wolf relaxed. She moved 1 foot closer. The black wolf rested his head on his paws. Another thunderclap shook the tower. Evelisse's tail struck the floor. Kaelor's wolf shifted backward until his warm side touched her knee. She placed the blanket over both of them. The golden words landed across the wolf's back. He sneezed beneath, one destination. Evelisse laughed softly and rested one hand in his fur. They stayed that way while rain drummed against stone. Her breathing matched the slow rise of his ribs. The she-wolf settled near the black wolf without being told. By midnight, Evelisse had returned fully human. Kaelor's wolf remained beside her. His head occupied half her lap, and one heavy paw pinned the blanket over her ankles. "You planned this," she murmured. The wolf appeared asleep. "Your tail is moving." It stopped. Evelisse leaned against the wall. Warmth surrounded her beneath the blanket, scented with smoke, damp cedar, and wet wolf. She slept. At dawn, Kaelor woke human under a blanket, reading "One Destination." Evelisse slept against his shoulder. Her hand rested over his heart. His arm encircled her waist, and their legs had ignored every diplomatic boundary. Kaelor examined the situation. The fire had gone out. The door remained propped against its broken hinge. Rain softened to a silver mist outside. His wolf offered no apology. Evelisse opened her eyes. Neither moved. "Your wolf stole the blanket," she said. "Your wolf followed him." Evelisse argued. "He was blocking the door." She could have chosen another direction. Evelisse became aware of his hand at her waist. Kaelor became aware that she had noticed. He released her carefully. She sat up and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. Her hair had dried into dark waves. A faint crease from Kaelor's shirt marked one cheek. "Thank you," she said. "For stealing the blanket? For not watching." Kaelor understood. "You never need to perform a shift for me." His voice carried no command. The absence of one mattered. Evelisse met his eyes. "You would have made a dangerous husband." Kaelor's expression changed slightly. "Would have?" She looked toward the dead fire. "We are still escaping." "Yes." Neither sounded pleased. They found the southern road before breakfast. The storm had washed branches and stones across it. Water ran in shallow sheets toward the lake. Their boots sank into mud with every step. Kaelor's direction sense returned with open terrain. He identified a distant mill tower and estimated they had lost only half a day. Moon Bay remained reachable. The route crossed a ravine before the next town. A wooden footbridge usually connected the banks. Usually had become an important word. The storm tore away the central section. 4 planks remained on their side, 3 on the other, and 2 ropes sagged above brown water. Evelisse stood at the edge. "Can we go around?" Kaelor checked the map. 6 miles north, toward the people searching for us. "Yes." He set down the trunk and tested the rope. "We can repair it." Evelisse indicated the missing planks. "With what?" Kaelor looked toward several fallen young trees. His wolf liked strength. His human judgment occasionally permitted it too early. He shifted his hands into claws, gripped a narrow trunk, and pulled. The tree moved. So did half the root bank. Mud collapsed toward his boots. Evelisse seized his coat and dragged him backward as the tree slid into the ravine. It struck the water and disappeared downstream. She released him. "Excellent. We have repaired a different location." Kaelor brushed mud from his sleeves. The roots were weak. The tree knew that. They needed lighter poles, strong rope, and controlled force. The honeymoon trunk contained one of those things. Evelisse removed the decorative gold cord that had tied the blanket. It was woven around a strong linen core. She also found 4 sash cords and the blue ribbon from the festival. Kaelor refused to sacrifice the winner's ribbon. Although he had refused to wear it, he now considered most promising union an achievement worth preserving. He put it in his pocket and called that practical. The ribbon was too short for rope. Evelisse called it sentimental and enjoyed his failure to answer. They cut narrow branches and tied them into 2 light bridge panels. Kaelor knew structural weight and anchor placement. Evelisse knew estate knots, cart lashings, and how to stop him from pulling every rope until it begged for mercy. She stood behind him and guided 1 knot over his hand. The loop went under, not over. Kaelor preferred military knots. Evelisse preferred knots that opened without a knife. Responsible travelers did not abandon a bridge tied with their marital blanket. Her breath touched his shoulder. He turned his head. Evelisse remained close, 1 hand around his wrist. The rain-clean air carried her rose-leaf scent. His wolf leaned toward it. Evelisse complimented the improvement in his hands. Kaelor claimed they possessed many skills before meeting her. She had merely witnessed the public demonstrations involving broken doors and expensive shirts. The words became suggestive after leaving his mouth. Evelisse's eyebrows lifted. Kaelor did not retreat. Further research may be arranged. Warmth entered her face. Your application remains under review. They finished the knot without looking at each other. The first panel bridged part of the gap. Kaelor crossed the remaining distance along the side rope, carrying a line around his waist. He secured it on the opposite bank, then pulled the second panel across. The repaired path looked imperfect but stable. Kaelor returned halfway and held out his hand. Evelisse stepped onto the wet planks. Do not look down, he advised. She looked down. Brown water rushed between rocks below. The bridge moved beneath her boots. That was poor advice. It required cooperation. Evelisse took another step. 1 old plank cracked. Her foot went through. Kaelor caught her wrist. The bridge panel swung sideways, throwing her against the rope. He pulled. Evelisse rose too quickly and collided with his chest. Kaelor wrapped 1 arm around her while balancing above the ravine. For several breaths, she could hear only water and his heartbeat. I have you, he said. The words were simple. His body made them true. Evelisse looked up. Rain clung to his lashes. A muddy streak crossed 1 cheek. He no longer resembled the distant king from formal meetings. She no longer wanted him distant. You may put me down, she said, though her hands remained at his shoulders. We are above a ravine. Evelisse accepted. A practical objection. Entirely. He carried her the remaining few steps. On solid ground, Kaelor lowered her slowly. His hands stayed at her waist. Evelisse remained within them. The memory of the festival chant passed between them. This time, there was no crowd. Kaelor's gaze dropped toward her mouth. Evelisse's pulse answered. Then the honeymoon trunk began sliding across the repaired bridge. They had forgotten to secure it. Kaelor released her and caught the handle before the trunk entered the ravine. The latch opened. Matching plates, the harmony book, and a bottle of companion perfume spilled across the planks. The perfume shattered. A cloud of sweet flowers surrounded Kaelor. Evelisse covered her nose and informed him that he smelled like an entire wedding. Kaelor observed that she had almost kissed him. Evelisse observed that he had almost lost their luggage. Both statements could be true, although only the luggage required immediate attention. His wolf disagreed strongly. They repacked the trunk. The harmony book had fallen open to Principle 34. Shared danger can awaken physical attachment. Couples should distinguish gratitude from lasting desire. Evelisse read it twice. Kaelor took the book and closed it. The author remains intrusive. For once, the author may have a point. He looked at her. Evelisse tied the damaged latch. We are tired, wet, and still bound by a marriage neither chose. I do not want our first honest decision confused with that. Kaelor understood what she was refusing and what she was not. At Moonbay, he said, after we end the old arrangement, I will ask again. Her hands paused over the knot. You are assuming my answer. No. I am preparing to risk it. Evelisse looked down to hide a smile. Deeply heroic. I survived your driving. You hid under the seat, Kaelor corrected her. A tactical position. Beside the gravy boats. Kaelor lifted the trunk. They provided cover. They continued south. Something between them had changed on the bridge. They had not kissed, declared love, or altered the destination. Yet flirting now occupied the road beside them like a third traveler. At the next stream, Evelisse asked whether Kaelor planned to remove the perfume scent. He washed his face and coat. The floral cloud remained. It may be permanent, she said. You appear pleased. It makes the Black Wolf of Northwatch smell approachable. Kaelor stepped closer, bringing roses and alpha warmth around her. Approachable by whom? Evelisse's she-wolf lifted her head. Travelers with poor judgment, you chose the middle road. Evelisse called it one mistake. You are still walking beside it. She held his gaze, then continued down the road. Kaelor followed with the trunk and a smile she could not see. By evening, they reached a farm that rented hayloft spaces to route travelers. The farmer accepted 2 honeymoon tokens and offered them a ladder, a lantern, and one warning about the resident rooster. The rooster considered sunrise a flexible concept. It began shouting at midnight. Kaelor threw a heart pillow toward the sound. The pillow sailed through the loft opening and landed in the water trough. The rooster shouted again. Evelisse lay beneath the wedding blanket, shaking with laughter. Kaelor called his response restrained. Evelisse called it an attack on livestock with marital bedding. Kaelor settled back beside her. They had arranged separate piles of hay, but the blanket covered both because the storm had ruined their second option. The space between them measured 1 pillow. Only 5 remained. The rooster started it, he said. Evelisse turned onto her side. Moonlight entered through the loft boards, leaving pale stripes across his face. Evelisse asked whether he had been serious on the bridge. Kaelor was. 4 formal meetings and 4 unreasonable days seemed brief to her. To him, the days contained better information. He knew she drove well and read northern signs badly. He knew she kicked kings into lakes, although her sample remained limited to 1. Evelisse smiled. What else do you know? Kaelor looked at her across the remaining pillow. He knew she checked prices before purchasing, counted exits when entering rooms, and gave the best part of bread to others without comment. She grew quiet when afraid of disappearing. Her she-wolf liked his fur but pretended otherwise. He knew she laughed with her whole face when nobody important was watching. Enough to want more, he said. The rooster shouted again. Evelisse pulled the pillow from between them and threw it toward the loft opening. It struck the wall several feet short. Kaelor looked at the empty space she had created. Poor aim, she said. Clearly. Neither replaced the pillow. The rooster began its official morning performance 3 hours later. Kaelor woke with hay in his hair and Evelisse's hand tucked beneath his arm. The empty pillow remained near the wall, innocent of its strategic removal. Evelisse opened one eye. If you mention this, I will blame your wolf. My wolf is asleep. Then he cannot defend himself. Kaelor drew his arm away slowly. You are becoming dangerous. I began this journey by stealing you. You stole a carriage. I was an unlisted benefit. They climbed down for breakfast. The farmer served oats, milk, and eggs fried in a heavy pan. Kaelor offered to help carry plates. He picked up 4 at once, misjudged the narrow kitchen door, and removed a hanging bundle of herbs with his shoulder. Leaves covered his hair. The farmer's wife watched him set down the plates. New husband? Evelisse nodded gravely, still under instruction. Kaelor handed her a plate. My wife has severe management tendencies. The word wife came too easily. Both paused. The farmer's wife smiled at them with the patience of someone who had raised 6 children and 2 stubborn goats. Kaelor changed the subject by asking about the South Road. It remained passable, but the storm had delayed all coaches. They would need to walk another full day before finding transport. The pursuit riders had passed the farm near dawn. They followed the main route toward Moon Bay. For the first time, Kaelor and Evelisse were behind them rather than ahead. They do not know we left the road, Evelisse reasoned. Kaelor predicted, they will search Moonbay first. Then we wait until after they leave. Kaelor unfolded the route map. A smaller lakeside track joined the main road near the port. It crossed 2 fishing villages and avoided the official checkpoints. They chose it. The farmer sold them a canvas pack, so Kaelor no longer had to carry the trunk by one weakened handle. They left the trunk itself in the barn after transferring its contents. Evelisse kept the book, tokens, passes, blanket, remaining handkerchiefs, and the 2 gold-rimmed cups. Kaelor asked why they needed cups. Evelisse blamed the heart pillows he had left in agricultural service, which explained nothing. She wanted to preserve something from the wedding gifts. He looked at her. Our wedding gifts, she corrected. Flirting fell silent for half a mile after that. The lakeside path wound through open meadows. White gulls circled above the water, and fishing boats moved beyond reeds. Sunlight dried the last storm dampness from their clothes. Without the trunk, they traveled faster. They also walked close enough for their shoulders to brush on narrow sections. At midday, they stopped beside a spring. Evelisse filled the paired cups and handed one to Kaelor. His cup read His Majesty. Hers read Her Grace. Mine is inaccurate, she noted. A princess is addressed as Highness. The cupmaker feared extra letters. Evelisse countered, Your entire title fits. Royal efficiency. Evelisse a drink? I will take your cup. You plan to become king? I plan to own the better cup. Kaelor exchanged them. I have survived losing a raft. I can survive this. You did not lose the raft. You entered it dramatically. You remember the details with suspicious affection. Evelisse nearly spilled her water. Kaelor continued down the path before she found an answer. His wolf felt unbearably pleased. The first fishing village had no inn, but a laundress accepted 1 route token to clean their mud-stained clothing. She gave them coarse work garments while they waited. Kaelor received a shirt with sleeves ending above his wrists. Evelisse received trousers held up by a rope belt. The laundress examined the embroidered blanket and asked whether the dark stain was blood. Evelisse listed lake water, mud, perfume, hay, and marital conflict. The woman charged extra for the final ingredient. They spent the waiting hour mending fishing nets for a meal. Kaelor's large fingers initially made knots too tight. Evelisse showed him the correct tension. He leaned close and labeled the lesson further research. She told him that his application lacked references. His wolf was biased. His captain had watched her kick him into a lake. Neither qualified as neutral. The old fisherman beside them began coughing into his sleeve. Evelisse suspected he was hiding laughter. Their cleaned blanket returned smelling of soap and lavender. Most of the companion perfume had vanished from Kaelor's coat, to Evelisse's private disappointment. They continued toward the second village. Near sunset, they encountered a wagon stuck in sand. A family had tried to move a load of clay pots too close to the shore. Kaelor put his shoulder against the rear without waiting for payment. Evelisse organized the family members around the wheels and redistributed the heaviest crates. Together, they freed it. The grateful potter offered them transport to the next village. Kaelor sat in back between towers of bowls. Evelisse sat beside him, their knees touching whenever the wagon turned. This resembles our first carriage, she said. There are fewer gravy boats, Evelisse added, and you are above the seat. A significant improvement in our relationship. The potter's 2 daughters sat near the front. One turned around and asked how long they had been married. Evelisse answered 4 days before remembering it was their 4th day of escape, not marriage. Kaelor noticed the mistake. It has been a demanding 4 days, he told the girls. The younger child asked whether he loved his wife. Evelisse became very interested in the passing reeds. Kaelor could have dismissed the question with humor. Instead, he considered it with the seriousness he gave every promise. I am learning how, he said. Evelisse turned back. The girls accepted his answer. Children understood unfinished knowledge better than councils did. At the second village, the potter refused payment and directed them to a small guest house beside the boatyard. The room contained one bed. Neither expressed surprise. The owner offered extra blankets for the floor. Kaelor asked for them, then watched Evelisse hide a yawn behind one hand. She had slept poorly in the hayloft and walked most of the day. "Keep the blankets," Evelisse told the owner. "The bed is large enough." Kaelor waited until the door closed. "Are you certain? We have survived one bed, one tower, one raft, and one municipal coat." Kaelor maintained. "The coat damaged trust." "Then stay on your side." They arranged the remaining heart pillows between them. Only 3 had survived the rout. The barrier reached neither head nor feet. Kaelor lay on his back with his hands folded over his stomach. Evelisse lay facing the wall. Moonlight silvered the ceiling. Boats knocked gently against docks outside, accompanied by water moving under timber. Neither slept. "What will you do when you return?" Evelisse asked. "Explain that a king can reject a ceremony without rejecting his duties." "They will be furious." Kaelor confirmed. "Yes. You sound pleased." "I have attended 6 council meetings about napkin embroidery. Fury may improve their focus." Evelisse smiled toward the wall. "And after the explanation?" Kaelor knew what she meant. "If your answer is favorable, I will request permission to visit you." Evelisse asked, "Permission from whom?" "You." She rolled onto her back. Kaelor continued watching the ceiling. "My previous methods involved too many secretaries." "How would you ask?" Kaelor answered, "Directly. Practice." He turned his head. The pillow wall separated their faces. "Evelisse, may I visit you after we return?" She pretended to consider. "For what purpose?" "Further research." "That sounds academically irresponsible." Kaelor promised, "I will bring references, not your wolf. He intends to come." Evelisse pulled one pillow from the barrier and placed it beneath her head. "Then your request remains under review." Kaelor removed the second pillow. "Can the applicant influence the review?" "That would be corruption. I have access to excellent cups." She took the final pillow and put it under his head. Rejected. No barrier remained. Their eyes met across the narrow bed. Kaelor reached out and moved one strand of hair from Evelisse's cheek. He gave her time to stop him. She did not. His fingertips traced the warm line near her temple. Evelisse moved closer by an inch. The room seemed to hold its breath with them. Kaelor's gaze dropped to her mouth. No crowd chanted. No trunk fell. No magical candle played music. He could kiss her. She wanted him to. That truth appeared openly in her eyes. Kaelor stopped. "Moonbay," he whispered. Evelisse released a breath. "Moonbay." She did not move away. Neither rebuilt the pillow barrier. They woke before dawn with their hands joined between them. Kaelor's wolf had surfaced enough to give him one black ear. Evelisse opened her eyes and touched it. "Your discipline is failing," Kaelor admitted, "only in one area." "Which one?" He looked at her from the same pillow. "Further research is required." She laughed and climbed out of bed before he could become less disciplined. The 5th day began with fog. Moonbay lay less than 30 miles south. They could reach the outskirts by evening if they found a boat or cart. At breakfast, the guesthouse owner mentioned a mail barge leaving within the hour. Honeymoon route passes allowed deck travel. The barge followed the shore canal for 20 miles. They boarded beneath fog thick enough to hide the village roofs. Barrels and mail sacks occupied most of the deck. The captain gave them a narrow bench beside the cabin. Kaelor inspected every approaching boat. Evelisse studied the map. The route passed 3 checkpoint docks. Their bearer pass remained valid, but news of the missing royal couple had spread. At the first dock, an official boarded with fresh sketches. The new artist had improved Kaelor's hair and made Evelisse look angry enough to arrest herself. Passengers formed a line. Evelisse opened the pack. "Blanket?" Kaelor shook his head. "They have already seen that disguise." "Robes? I would prefer capture." The barge carried mail sacks labeled for different villages. Kaelor selected 2 empty canvas covers from a repair pile. They pulled them over their clothing like work aprons and lifted a crate between them. The official reached their position. Occupation? Evelisse answered first. Mail handlers. Kaelor lifted the crate higher to hide his face. It contained small brass bells. Every movement announced them. The official studied Evelisse. You look familiar. Kaelor's wolf prepared to release scent again. Evelisse stepped on his foot. I competed in the Moon Lake Partners Festival, she said. We won. The official recognized the ribbon tied around her wrist. Most promising union? Kaelor lowered the crate enough to show it, a respected title. The bells rang. The official smiled, congratulated them, and moved on. Kaelor waited until the man left the barge. You kept the ribbon. Practical identification. Kaelor returned the charge. Sentimental. Too short for rope. He recognized his own excuse and smiled. At the second checkpoint, guards searched for separate travelers. Kaelor and Evelisse sat beneath the paired blanket, sharing one cup and looking offensively content. Nobody questioned them. At the third, no official appeared because the dockmaster was asleep. The rest of the journey passed through marshland bright with late flowers. Fog lifted, revealing the wide blue lake and low southern hills. Kaelor and Evelisse ate cheese on the deck. They used the gold-rimmed cups for water and argued over which belonged to whom. You gave me the better cup, Evelisse reminded him. Under temporary conditions. Evelisse declared, royal gifts cannot be reclaimed. You rejected the royal gift attached to it. She looked at him. I rejected the arrangement. Kaelor's humor faded. Evelisse placed his cup into his hand, not necessarily the man. His fingers closed around the cup. She returned to her cheese as though she had not shifted the entire day beneath him. Kaelor leaned one shoulder against the cabin. You enjoy leaving me without answers. I am preparing you for Moon Bay. Kaelor called it cruel training. You survived the lake. You sound increasingly fond of that memory. Evelisse smiled into her cup. The mail barge reached its final dock near sunset. Moonbay's towers appeared 10 miles farther south, dark against an orange sky. The ferry masts were visible beyond them. Their destination was close enough to touch in imagination. They thanked the barge captain and began walking the final stretch. Neither hurried. Kaelor found a reason to stop at every road marker. Evelisse inspected 2 harmless clouds and retied a boot that had not loosened. The road soon widened around an evening market built for travelers approaching the port. Canvas roofs crowded both shoulders. Lanterns swung above baskets of pears, smoked fish, wool socks, and objects whose only purpose seemed to be disappointing tourists. A wooden moon hung over the entrance. Someone had painted a smiling face on it. Rain had stretched the smile into an expression of deep concern. Kaelor studied it longer than necessary. Evelisse observed that the moon appeared to share his feelings about tomorrow. He denied having feelings recognizable by roadside decoration. His wolf, less disciplined, watched her with an unhappy steadiness. The market offered their last chance to prepare for separate journeys. Evelisse needed food for the western ship. Kaelor needed dry clothing for the northern deck. They divided the remaining coins and agreed to shop independently. They remained independent for nearly 40 seconds. Kaelor followed her to a baker because he distrusted the size of her food bundle. Evelisse followed him to a clothing stall because he had selected a shirt priced for someone without royal income. The shirt was brown, coarse, and large enough to shelter a modest family. Its seller claimed it suited kings, fishermen, and men fleeing difficult conversations. Kaelor asked how the seller had identified his occupation. The old man pointed at the wanted sketch beside the stall. The drawing showed the missing king with a heroic jaw, furious eyebrows, and hair blowing in 3 directions. Beside him, the princess wore enough jewels to sink the mail barge. The seller had not recognized either of them. He merely believed every male traveler fled conversations. Evelisse purchased the shirt before Kaelor could answer. She negotiated the price down by mentioning a split seam, uneven dye, and the fact that no modest family had requested shelter. Kaelor watched the seller surrender 2 coins. He had seen generals show greater resistance. At the next stall, he bought her dried apples, oatcakes, and a twist of sugared nuts. Evelisse reminded him that her ship sold meals. He had sampled food on royal vessels. He considered the word meal dangerously generous. She accepted the provisions. Refusal required returning the nuts, which neither her pride nor her she-wolf supported. They passed a stall of carved travel charms. Tiny boats, wolves, moons, and paired hearts hung from red threads. The stallkeeper waved a double wolf toward them and promised it prevented marital arguments. Kaelor suggested the woman sell steering poles instead. Evelisse moved him onward before he explained the lake. Near the center fountain, a stationer displayed maps, waterproof document cases, and brass compasses. Every compass needle pointed north except one, which seemed committed to a pie stall. Evelisse avoided the display. Kaelor noticed. His smile carried the precise amount of danger she had learned to expect. He tested 4 instruments, rejected the trader interested in pie, and chose a small compass in a leather case. The lid had the 4 directions stamped in large, undeniable letters. Evelisse told him she did not need it. He agreed. He needed her to own it. She reminded him that she had navigated them successfully to Moon Bay. He reminded her that they had first crossed a lake sideways. The stationer listened with growing interest. By the time Kaelor paid, the man had concluded they were honeymooners whose ceremony involved transportation challenges. Evelisse took the compass, only to end the discussion. She clipped it inside her coat and privately liked its solid weight. Kaelor pretended not to see her test the needle twice. They continued beneath hanging lanterns. A fiddler played near the fountain. Children chased one another through the warm smell of fried dough. For a little while, the market allowed them to be 2 dusty travelers wasting an evening. Then they reached a scribe's booth. The scribe offered letters carried on the next morning's ferry. A painted board listed western and northern destinations in separate columns. Tomorrow became real again. Evelisse bought 1 sheet of paper. Kaelor bought another. They stood at opposite ends of the counter and began writing notices of their safe return. Neither knew how to explain 6 missing days without inviting 6 months of supervision. Evelisse wrote that she had traveled voluntarily and remained unharmed. She omitted the carriage theft, the raft battle, and every shared bed. Kaelor wrote that he had not been abducted. He stared at that sentence, then added that nobody should punish the princess. Evelisse saw the line upside down. She added the same protection for him. Her brother was unlikely to imprison a foreign Alpha King. He was entirely capable of trying. The scribe sanded both letters and asked whether they wanted them bundled as marital correspondence. They declined with suspicious speed. The woman tied them together anyway, because one courier served both courts. A red string joined the pages. Kaelor looked at the knot. Evelisse looked at the separate addresses. Neither made the obvious joke. They left the booth more quietly. Beyond the fountain, a cart had lost 1 wheel beneath a load of winter blankets. The elderly driver stood helplessly beside it while customers climbed around the obstruction. Kaelor set down their packs. He lifted the axle with one shoulder while Evelisse found stones to brace it. His strength drew attention, so she loudly complained that her husband always showed off near furniture. Several women nodded with immediate sympathy. Kaelor nearly dropped the axle. The driver replaced the wheel pin. In payment, she offered them a thick blue scarf long enough for 2 people. Evelisse tried to refuse. The woman wrapped it around both their necks and declared that stubborn couples caught fewer colds when tied together. They walked away shoulder to shoulder because the knot sat behind Kaelor's neck. He could have removed it. Evelisse could have stopped. Neither did. Their matched pace came easily now. 6 days earlier, they had fought over control of a runaway carriage. That evening, they crossed a crowded market without pulling the scarf once. At a quiet lane near the southern gate, Evelisse finally loosened it. Kaelor's warmth left her shoulder first. She folded the wool and placed it across both packs. One scarf could not travel in two directions. Kaelor asked which ship should take it. Evelisse suggested they leave the decision until morning. It was a poor solution and therefore matched most of their journey. He accepted. His hand rested briefly on the folded wool before he shouldered both packs. Their remaining food token brought them to a communal supper beneath the market's largest awning. Long tables surrounded an iron stove. Travelers paid once, then filled wooden bowls from pots of bean stew and peppered rice. Kaelor filled Evelisse's bowl before his own. He added bread, removed the raw onion she disliked, and found the least damaged spoon without asking. She noticed every choice. 6 days ago, his council had possessed a folder about her education, bloodline, wardrobe, and diplomatic value. The Alpha King himself had not known whether she drank tea. Now he knew she disliked raw onion. He knew she counted windows when nervous. He knew thunder brought her she-wolf too close, and commands drove the animal farther away. It was not the knowledge kingdoms recorded. It was the kind that made a shared table possible. Evelisse returned from the bread basket with the darkest crust for him. Kaelor preferred bread nearly burned. The festival board had never asked that. They sat near the edge of the awning. Rainwater from an earlier shower dropped from the canvas at regular intervals. It struck a bucket with a hollow note that joined the fiddler's distant tune. Across from them, two merchants argued over salt prices. A toddler beneath the next table fed rice to a patient dog. Nobody cared that a king and princess ate from wooden bowls nearby. Evelisse took the folded festival questionnaire from the map case. The host had given it to every couple as a souvenir. Kaelor had saved theirs because the back provided useful space for route notes. Most answers remained wrong. They decided to correct them. They corrected breakfast first. Evelisse preferred cinnamon porridge with sour cherries. Kaelor required dark bread and enough coffee to alarm a physician. For travel, he chose the Western Sea. She chose any city where nobody knew her title, and every road sign used words. Their old answers changed from away and anywhere else to places they might someday visit by choice. The answers became less dignified and more accurate. They moved to unreasonable fears. Evelisse feared decorative fish after a marble one fell into her childhood bath. Kaelor feared geese. He called it tactical respect based on experience. Evelisse called it fear based on feathers. At 16, Kaelor had attempted to cross a farmyard in formal white trousers. A nesting goose chased him onto a rain barrel and guarded the ladder until sunset. 2 soldiers witnessed the siege. Both later received excellent postings in distant provinces, which Kaelor insisted was coincidence. Evelisse laughed hard enough to lose her spoon. The toddler beneath the next table retrieved it and demanded a story in payment. Evelisse pointed at Kaelor. He spent 5 minutes describing a mighty young prince trapped by a winged monster. The child asked who won. Kaelor admitted that history belonged to the goose. Evelisse added geese beneath greatest weakness. His original answer for her had been diplomacy. Hers had been being large. Kaelor replaced his answer with fear of becoming small in someone else's life. Evelisse stopped smiling. The market moved around them. Bowls knocked against tables. Steam carried pepper and wood smoke beneath the awning. A seller outside shouted the price of pears. Kaelor did not explain or take back the words. He continued eating, giving her room to decide whether they had gone too far. Evelisse read the answer again. She had spent months fearing that marriage would erase her. Until the coach ride, she had never understood that Kaelor feared a quieter version of the same loss. Power did not prevent disappearance. Sometimes it merely made everyone describe the disappearance as duty. She crossed out being large on his side of the page. In its place, she wrote, makes space without leaving. Kaelor read it. His spoon paused halfway to his mouth. The phrase described the watchtower, the bed, the bridge, and every moment when he could have commanded her. He had guarded doors without closing them. He had stepped back without abandoning her. His wolf pressed close beneath his skin. Evelisse's she-wolf answered with a warm, quiet movement. Kaelor asked whether that was truly his greatest strength. Evelisse told him that being large remained a close second. The seriousness broke cleanly. He accused her of damaging a meaningful moment. She claimed meaningful moments required ventilation. The final question asked what each partner needed during conflict. Kaelor needed direct words before silence became a story in his head. Evelisse needed time to answer without someone deciding what her pause meant. They wrote those responses themselves. When the bowls were empty, Evelisse folded the questionnaire and put it beside the compass. The paper no longer proved compatibility to a festival host. It proved they had finally done what the arranged marriage never allowed. They had asked. They had listened. They had left the answers intact. Kaelor carried both bowls to the wash station. He returned with a small honey pastry he claimed had appeared through responsible budgeting. Evelisse knew exactly how many coins remained. Responsible budgeting had not produced it. She divided the pastry anyway and gave him the larger half. He exchanged the pieces while she looked at the questionnaire. She noticed on the first bite and exchanged them again. The pastry crossed the table 4 times before the toddler seized both halves and solved the dispute. Kaelor stared at the empty plate. Evelisse accepted the judgment as another royal defeat by a smaller opponent. The road descended toward a small traveler's inn outside the port. This would be their final night before the ferry. The realization changed every ordinary movement. Kaelor held the inn door for her. Evelisse brushed his hand while passing. Their wolves leaned toward each other beneath skin. Inside, the innkeeper took their pass and announced that the honeymoon suite remained available. Kaelor and Evelisse answered together, "We will take it." The final honeymoon suite had no magical candle. It compensated with a ceiling mural of 2 wolves running toward a moon, a bed shaped like a boat, and curtains covered in embroidered wedding rings. Kaelor inspected the bed's wooden bow. "This may sink." Evelisse pressed one hand against the mattress. "Only if your wolf board's wet. You invited him onto the last blanket," Evelisse explained. "He occupied the door and refused instructions. He remembers differently. Your wolf edits history." The room had a small balcony overlooking the southern road. Beyond low rooftops, Moonbay's harbor lights began appearing along the lake. The morning ferry rested at the outer pier, its dark sails folded. Evelisse leaned against the balcony rail. They had made it. Tomorrow she could take the western connection. Kaelor could board north. Within hours, water would separate them more effectively than the lake outlet had. Kaelor stood behind her, close enough that cedar warmed the cooling air. He pointed out her ship, recommended a central cabin, and warned against the upper bunks in rough water. Evelisse already knew all 3 things. She accused him of arranging her journey because he could no longer arrange her marriage. Kaelor was only trying to remain useful. His 5 days carrying luggage had documented that quality. The gravy boats had witnessed the beginning. Kaelor rested his hands on the rail beside hers. "I do not like the thought of you traveling alone. I managed before meeting you." "You chose the middle, wolf." Evelisse blamed the landscape. "The signs were hostile. I can arrange a guard at the port." "No." He accepted the answer, though his wolf objected. Evelisse heard it in the low sound beneath his breath. "You promised not to let him decide." "He is expressing an advisory opinion. Tell him I will be safe." Kaelor looked out at the ferry. "He does not believe me." Neither did the man. They ate downstairs among sailors, merchants, and 3 other honeymoon couples. Kaelor purchased 2 ferry tickets with nearly all their remaining coin. He selected the central cabin for Evelisse and the northern deck for himself. The ticket clerk assumed they wanted separate accommodations after an argument and offered a reconciliation discount. Evelisse accepted it. Kaelor objected after they left the counter. She valued 3 saved coins over accuracy, which had never purchased breakfast. She spent 1 saved coin on 2 honey cakes. Kaelor accepted his without further complaint. Back in the room, Evelisse packed the travel pass, her ticket, one gold-rimmed cup, and half the remaining tokens into a small cloth bundle. Kaelor took the other cup, the map, and the festival ribbon. She noticed the ribbon disappear into his coat. Too short for rope? Extremely. Evelisse asked, then why keep it? Evidence of victory. We won because the other tents collapsed. Kaelor concluded victory does not require attractive circumstances. Evelisse folded the paired blanket. It would not fit in either bundle. You take it, Kaelor said. Your northern lodge will be colder. Your western ship may have poor bedding. Evelisse informed him, you are impossible. We can cut it in half. Evelisse held the blanket against the light. The center displayed 2 paths, 1 destination. Cutting it would separate the phrase between paths and destination. Leave it at the inn, she decided. Kaelor agreed too quickly. Neither wanted to own the object alone. The boat-shaped bed waited behind them. This time they did not build a pillow wall. Evelisse changed behind the screen, then lay on the left beneath ordinary white covers. Kaelor extinguished the lamp and took the right. Darkness settled over the room. Harbor bells sounded in the distance, marking the hours before departure. Will you regret this? Evelisse asked. Which part? The wedding, the escape, me kicking you. Kaelor considered each separately. I regret the carriage wheel, he said. The estate will invoice me. It was my stolen carriage. Then the invoice is yours. Evelisse reasoned. Marriage would have made it shared property. Our first financial disagreement. Evelisse smiled in the dark. And the rest? Kaelor rolled onto his side. Moonlight from the balcony traced her profile. I regret that we needed to flee before we could speak honestly. I do not regret finding you in the driver's seat. Evelisse corrected him. You found me while hiding beneath it. My perspective was limited. His humor faded gently. Do you regret it? Evelisse looked at him. She regretted fear, mud, ruined shoes, and nearly falling into a ravine. She regretted that Moonbay existed close enough to reach. Ask me tomorrow, she said. After the arrangement ends? After it ends. Kaelor reached across the small distance. His hand stopped palm up between them. Evelisse placed hers in it. They slept that way. Morning arrived with harbor bells and shouting below the balcony. Kaelor woke first. His wolf was already alert, filling him with warning. He crossed to the window. Mounted guards entered the inn yard from both directions. Northern black uniforms filled the left gate. Southern green uniforms filled the right. Each group saw the other and reached for weapons before recognizing shared confusion. Captain Jorvin dismounted at the center. Evelesse's elder brother stepped from a southern carriage. He wore yesterday's formal wedding coat and the expression of a man who had not slept since losing a princess. Behind him came the White Lake estate manager carrying a damaged ledger. The wedding protocol mistress carried the unfinished ceremony schedule. Kaelor closed the curtain. They found us. Evelisse sat up. Which side? All sides. She joined him at the window. Her brother was accusing Jorvin of helping the Alpha King abduct her. Jorvin replied that the princess had stolen a royal carriage and assaulted his sovereign. The estate manager attempted to ask who had authorized the carriage to enter the lake. Nobody listened. The protocol mistress announced that the ceremonial flowers had wilted. Everyone ignored her too. We could use the back door, Evelisse suggested. Kaelor looked toward the harbor. The ferry had begun loading. They could still run. The thought no longer felt free. It felt like repeating silence in a new direction. No, he said. We go down. Evelisse heard responsibility, not surrender. Together. They dressed in the plain clothes bought on the route. Kaelor tied the festival ribbon inside his coat. Evelisse pinned her hair without the missing pearl comb. They left the honeymoon blanket folded on the boat bed. When they entered the yard, every argument stopped. Evelesse's brother crossed the distance first and pulled her into a fierce embrace. He checked her face, hands, and borrowed dress before glaring at Kaelor. Did he hurt you? No. Jorvin reached Kaelor. Majesty, were you taken against your will? Kaelor looked at Evelisse. She looked back. He could protect her reputation by claiming responsibility. A king kidnapping his own intended bride would cause outrage, but less lasting damage to her than the belief that she had rejected him publicly. "I took her," he said. At exactly the same moment, Evelisse told her brother, "I took him." Silence returned in a more confused form. The estate manager opened his ledger. Evelisse's brother frowned. "You kidnapped the Alpha King?" Jorvin looked at Kaelor. "The princess abducted you?" "No," Kaelor said. "Yes," Evelisse replied. They turned toward each other. "You cannot claim this," Kaelor told her. "I stole the carriage." "I was already inside it," Evelisse added, "without permission. It was my carriage." The estate manager raised one hand. The carriage belonged to White Lake Estate. Nobody had invited his expertise, but it ended the dispute for one breath. Evelisse's brother rubbed his forehead. "Start at the beginning." "That will take 6 days," she warned. The protocol mistress lifted her schedule. "The marriage ceremony remains incomplete. We could return to the estate by noon and resume at the exchange of vows." Kaelor's wolf growled. Evelisse's she-wolf answered. The paired sound moved through the yard. Guards stepped back from instinct. Kaelor faced both parties. He no longer wore a crown, but the stillness of the new king had returned around him. "There will be no resumed ceremony." The protocol mistress opened her mouth. He raised one hand. "Not today. Not under the existing arrangement." Evelisse joined him. "Neither of us was kidnapped. We independently planned to leave before the vows. We met in the same carriage by accident." Her brother looked between them. "You were both escaping each other?" "Initially," Kaelor admitted. "And afterward?" Evelisse glanced at the king beside her. The situation became less efficient. Jorvin's gaze dropped to the festival ribbon visible inside Kaelor's coat. The captain had known him for 15 years. His eyebrows rose with dangerous understanding. Kaelor ignored him. The two runaways explained enough of the journey to establish mutual responsibility. Evelisse stole the vehicle. Kaelor chose the wrong compartment. She selected the wrong road. He failed to escape before discovery. She kicked him into the lake. He removed the push-pole with his tail. The estate manager took notes with growing distress. Neither mentioned shared beds, ear-scratching, or the nearly completed bridge kiss. Those belonged to them. Evelisse's brother listened until certainty replaced fear. His sister had not been coerced. She stood beside Kaelor because she wanted to. "What do you intend now?" he asked. Evelisse had rehearsed this answer during every mile toward Moon Bay. "We withdraw from the arranged engagement. We return to our responsibilities separately. Any future relationship begins only with our direct consent," Kaelor agreed. "No councils speaking for us. No altered invitations. No ceremony scheduled before a private conversation occurs." Jorvin looked relieved by every part except the possibility of arranging private royal travel. The protocol mistress looked at 6 days of unused paper. "Should I destroy the schedule?" Evelisse considered. "Keep the blank pages." The woman found this merciful. The estate manager presented the damage list. It included 1 carriage, 1 wheel, 1 torn trace, 6 wet gravy boats, a damaged porcelain goddess, and ceremonial towels requiring specialized care. Kaelor read the total. "The goddess survived." "Emotionally, we cannot know," the manager replied. Evelisse accepted half the invoice. Kaelor took the other. "We are not married," he reminded the manager. The damage displayed remarkable unity. The royal parties began arranging their return. Evelisse's brother ordered breakfast for everyone. Jorvin sent riders to cancel the harbor search. The protocol mistress sat beneath a tree and removed the words "wedding day" from a folder. Kaelor and Evelisse stood amid activity that no longer controlled them. The ferry bell rang. Their ship was preparing to leave. Evelisse held her western ticket. Kaelor held the northern one. They walked to the harbor without discussing why. Morning light spread across Moon Bay. Ropes creaked against timber posts. Sailors loaded the last crates while gulls circled above fish stalls. At the outer pier, the morning ferry released its mooring lines. Evelisse and Kaelor stopped on a rough wooden landing. Neither boarded. The ship moved slowly into open water, carrying 2 empty paid seats. Evelisse watched until the stern cleared the harbor wall. "We missed it," she said, deliberately. "That is an expensive habit." Kaelor turned toward her. "I was told accuracy never purchased breakfast." She smiled, but uncertainty remained beneath it. The old engagement had ended in the inn yard. Nothing now required them to remain together. This was the moment they had promised to reach before choosing anything new. Evelisse touched the folded ticket. "Do you still want to cancel the marriage?" "Yes." Her smile disappeared. Kaelor stepped closer before she could hide the reaction. "I want to cancel the marriage designed by people who never left us alone in a room," he continued. "I want to cancel the version where your silence speaks for you and mine speaks for me." Evelisse looked up. Wind lifted loose strands of her hair. Lake water tapped beneath the pier. Kaelor's wolf pressed near his skin, eager but quiet. The choice belonged to the man. "I do not want to replace it with another engagement," he said. "Not yet. I want to visit you without a council table. I want to hear your answers before someone improves them." He took a breath. "I want to know what makes you laugh when I am not falling into water. I want to see the estate you kept alive. I want to learn enough to answer one festival question correctly." Evelisse's eyes warmed. "Only one? I am newly crowned. My ambitions must remain realistic." She laughed, and Kaelor's expression softened. "Evelisse, will you be with me? Not as the queen selected for me, as the woman who chose the wrong road and refused to give me the raft." Her she-wolf moved toward him. Evelisse did not hide it. "Yes," she said, "but your description of our courtship requires revision. You may submit corrections directly." "I intend to, frequently." Kaelor touched her cheek. "Are we officially together?" "Officially, voluntarily, unfortunately for your dignity." Kaelor admitted, "My dignity drowned 5 days ago. It swam badly." He kissed her. The first touch was careful because they had waited too long to waste it. Evelisse's hand closed around the front of his coat. Kaelor drew her nearer, feeling her answer in the way she rose toward him. No wedding guests watched, no vows had been written. The harbor continued around them with ropes, gulls, fish, and ordinary morning noise. The kiss belonged only to their choice. Evelisse's lips curved beneath his. Kaelor felt the smile and deepened the kiss. His wolf lost patience with restraint. A black tail appeared behind him and swept across the pier. It struck Evelisse's discarded shoe. The shoe entered the lake with a small final splash. They broke apart. Evelisse looked over the edge. Her shoe floated beside a post. Kaelor looked behind himself. The tail withdrew. "He regrets that." Evelisse disagreed. "He does not. He regrets the timing." Evelisse folded her arms. "Retrieve it." Kaelor examined the distance. "There is a ladder. You are the celebrated Black Wolf of Northwatch." Kaelor recognized her motive. "You want to watch me swim again. Official courtship requires shared interests." Kaelor removed his coat and boots. "If I enter that water, I expect compensation. Your shoe retrieval will be sincerely praised." "I was considering another kiss." Evelisse leaned close enough for him to feel her breath. "Then swim quickly." Kaelor jumped. The water was colder than expected. He surfaced beside the shoe, pushed wet hair from his eyes, and found Evelisse laughing above him. "You did this intentionally," he accused. "Your tail acted independently," Kaelor accused her. "You encouraged him." "I have not spoken to him since the kiss." Kaelor retrieved the shoe. "He says your kiss was encouraging." Color entered her cheeks. "Your wolf is impertinent. He has submitted a favorable courtship report." Evelisse crouched near the edge. "And the man?" Kaelor looked up at her. "The man intends further research." She extended one hand. He took it, climbed the ladder, and delivered the shoe. Water streamed from his clothes. Evelisse used his discarded coat to dry his hair. Kaelor leaned into her hands shamelessly. Does every formal lover receive this treatment? He asked. Only those repeatedly defeated by lakes. Kaelor offered. I can arrange a regular schedule. Once a month, excessive wet wolf damages furniture. Jorvin reached the pier before the conversation became unsuitable for public harbor space. He found his soaked king leaning into the princess's hands and concluded, without surprise, that Kaelor had fallen in again. They returned to the inn-yard holding hands. The protocol mistress opened a fresh page until Kaelor warned her against choosing dates. Evelisse and Kaelor shared one carriage back to White Lake. He inspected beneath both seats before boarding, then sat beside her instead of opposite. The estate manager met them halfway with the damage total. It now included one harmony candle, listed as emotionally overworked. Evelisse blamed Kaelor's arguing. Kaelor blamed her compliments. They paid equal shares. By evening, the repaired Moonrose Arch stood above an empty aisle at White Lake Estate. Evelisse regarded it without grief. She and Kaelor passed the aisle, entered through an ordinary side door, and began the direct conversations their first engagement had never allowed. 3 months later, White Lake Estate hosted no wedding. It hosted a private afternoon visit involving 2 horses, 1 picnic basket, and strict instructions that no protocol officer approach the lake. Kaelor arrived from the north without a council delegation. Evelisse arrived from the south without formal silk. They had spent the previous months exchanging letters nobody was allowed to rewrite. Kaelor visited her estate twice. He learned that apple yields were more complicated than troop supplies, and that Evelisse's dairy roof had defeated 3 architects. Evelisse visited his court once. She attended 1 council session, corrected nobody without invitation, and then corrected Kaelor privately for 2 hours. Their relationship remained official, voluntary, and under frequent review. They walked to the old timber landing after lunch. The damaged gift carriage had been repaired and placed in estate storage. The porcelain goddess survived with a small crack and an understandably disappointed expression. The rough timber raft had also been repaired. Fresh rope secured its logs. 2 proper steering poles rested across the center. Evelisse stepped aboard. Did you inspect the weight limit? Kaelor followed. The raft sank slightly beneath him. I inspected its suitability for private courtship. Evelisse observed. Royal safety standards have declined. Only around you. She handed him 1 pole. You navigate. You chose the wrong road last time. It produced a useful result. They pushed away from shore. The raft moved across the quiet channel. Autumn leaves reflected gold in the water, and cool wind carried cedar from the hills. Kaelor guided them around the reeds. Evelisse watched his arms work beneath rolled sleeves. He noticed. Further research? Evelisse called it routine inspection. Your methods lack distance. She stepped closer. I can correct that. Evelisse kissed him. Kaelor let go of his pole to hold her waist. The raft turned. Its corner struck the only exposed rock in the channel. Both looked down at the harmless bump. Kaelor raised 1 eyebrow. You were navigating, Evelisse reminded him. You interfered with the navigator. She reminded him. You called it research. The findings were compelling. The raft drifted clear of the rock. Evelisse rested her arms around his neck. Perhaps some wrong turns are worth repeating. Kaelor drew her closer. Only if we take them together. This time, when he kissed her, his wolf kept its tail away from the steering pole. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romance Tales. I hope this story brought you a little laughter, warmth, and a peaceful moment in a world that can sometimes feel heavy. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and share it to spread more happiness. I'll see you in the next one.